Okay, we're going to get started very soon. Yeah, we're going to give it a few minutes and then I'm going to get started. Going to give it one more minute and then I'm going to get started. Just wait for any additional people. Okay, let's get started. So yes, hello and welcome to the Psychology of Comedy webinar. I'm hoping that this will be interesting to people who are looking at getting into comedy and will allow for you to be able to break down how comedy works, because the more we can break it down, the more we can then apply those theories ourselves. So we're looking at the psychology of comedy, why we laugh, and what makes comedy funny. Okay, so just gonna run you through what's gonna happen in this video. We're gonna have a little introduction, followed by some of the theories of comedy, and then we're gonna look at some of the psychological factors that come into comedy, and then we're also going to do you know what I've just noticed, right? So on my computer, right, that there just looks like a white smiley face, and I've also got it up in my just like a little screen here, and I can see that it's actually a tooth. So if anyone's wondering, oh, why is there a tooth there? It's because I just wanted it to be like a little smiley face that blended into the background. So each one of these, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking them down, and we're also going to look at some examples and some exercises that you can try at home to explore these, because the more you can explore them and test them out, the more that you can see which ones of these work for you, and the more that you go, okay, these work for me, the more you can then incorporate them into your acts and have them aid you and make your act that much more strong. So this is the introduction of the video. So like, people kind of think that comedy is just this ethereal thing, but actually in the last 20 to 30 years, more and more comedy academia has been rising up. Now you might think to yourself, comedy academia, silly. Well, I mean, if you're watching this video, you know, there's a chance that maybe you're not thinking that, but there is a perception of why even think about it. It's something that's ethereal, and we can't really quantify it, and we can't quantify it, but it's not as formless as would initially think. And the same things that people say about comedy now, you know, comedy being a part of drama, people were saying about drama 100 or so years ago when that split off from English. So give it enough time and you might find that some of these comedy theories become much more widely integrated and thought of in the same way that we're seeing with drama 100 to 150 years after we started taking drama more seriously from an academic context. Part of the problem is that it is a universal language, it transcends culture, and part of what is a block is that people struggle to tap into it willingly. So often people do it unthinkingly, or they'll do it in social situations, and then once they're taken out of those social situations, they're not able to bridge those connections. And part of that is because of the sociological factors, which we'll be looking at a little bit later on when we look at the social bonding part of this webinar. But that's part of the problem that we have, is that people struggle to tap into it, so they dismiss it as more ethereal than it is. So we can break this down to a number of key theories that look at why we laugh, and a lot of it is to do with tension and dispersion of tension, and also there is a certain social connection that we have, which we can trace all the way to primates, who also we can observe laughing. So there's something going on in our deep subconscious that we can start to unpick, and these are two of the main ones. The first one is incongruity theory, and the other one is relief theory. Now, very, very quickly, incongruity is where two things don't go together, and relief is where we break tension. We're going to go into those in a little bit more detail now, because comedy is an art form. It's not just a string of funny anecdotes, it's a car with an engine, and the more that we look at the engine and take the engine apart, the more chance we have of being able to supercharge that engine. So incongruity, as I mentioned, is this idea of two things that are put together that should not be together. So chalk and cheese, oil and water. No matter how much you have oil and water together, no matter how much you stir them together, they will eventually re-separate. And the idea is that when we put together two incongruous ideas and put them together in our in the mind of our audience, our brain, while your audience's brain is given a little bit of tension because it can't work it out, and that tension is released as laughter. So an example of this would be, what do you get when you cross a sheep and a kangaroo? And then the answer is a woolly jumper, which is the combination of the two aspects of the two, but it's also not quite a full connection, so therefore it is released as humour. Now the next one, so in terms of incongruity theory, these are two types of incongruity that you may come across, which is puns. So we've just seen that with the woolly jumper. It's a combination of words, sayings, idioms and phrases, and the English language is particularly effective for comedic writing, and part of that is because of our etymology of words, which you can trace back to when we got invaded so many times by the Romans, and when we got invaded by William the Conqueror, what would often happen is, so particularly in William the Conqueror's case, he took over and the aristocracy often spoke French, and the common people spoke English, or what was in those days, French and English. They won't have quite resembled the English language and the French language all those years ago, because languages evolve. But what happened specifically within the English language is that because of this dual language that was going on, there's a lot of words that have double meanings in modern day English. So, for example, beef and cow. In French, you would just call it le bœuf, which would be for both what you eat and what you when you see it and it's alive. And we don't have that. We have different words for both, which is unusual. Like an exception to that is chicken. So we call the live chicken a chicken, and we also call chicken when we eat it chicken as well. And other languages generally have it as the same word for both. But yeah, so that's just why the English language is particularly good for puns, for wordplay. Another type of incongruity is visual comedy, which is where you combine particularly when you combine social situations with visuals that don't belong, which can be a really quick way of activating incongruence in your audience. So, for example, Stan and Ollie, the Chuckle Brothers, they get themselves into these situations that they shouldn't be in. We've got preset ideas of what should happen, and then Stan and Ollie and the Chuckle Brothers absolutely subvert those expectations through their actions. And again, this creates an incongruence because we have an expectation. So next up, here are some exercises. So you can have a play around with wordplay. I particularly like to do haikus, which is a sentence, which is a poem which has a structure of 5, 7, and 5, and it's a really good way of just boiling down your ideas. And if you are to write a poem about a bat, such as, because this has two meanings, you've got vampire bat and you've also got baseball bat, you can write a poem about the vampire bat, write a poem about the baseball bat, and then start to play around with the lines in the poems to create that incongruence, and to see how meaning can change across the two in terms of your creating subversion. Another thing that you could do is a little game called reverse charades, which is, instead of acting the word out, you try to describe it. So a little bit like the board game Articulate. So you're not allowed to say the word, but you try to describe it and the meanings of the word. And particularly if you've got like a good group of friends, try and be as far away from that word as possible. You may find that through doing that, you'll be able to come up with ridiculous meanings for words that you're then able to flip in terms of your descriptors and in terms of misleading towards your punchlines. So next up, we got relief theory. Now, relief theory, I've spoken about a little bit on this channel, which is this idea that we have the potential to trigger the fight or flight mechanic when we put ourselves into comedic situations, because we're playing around with a lot of social ideologies in terms of if you make someone laugh, you have the potential to send your social credit up, and if you if your jokes fall flat, you have the potential to have it go down. So there's a little bit of tension in terms of whenever we enter into a comedic setting, either on or off stage, and this creates a little bit of tension for us and creates a little bit of tension for the audience. And through subverting expectations and having punchlines, you're able to diffuse that tension, whilst also increasing your momentum across when you're speaking. So the example that I normally give is in Jimmy Carr's The Naked Jape with Lucy Greaves. They talk about the first person who laughed, and they put forth this hypothesis of a caveman who's running towards the edge of a cliff. He's been chased by a saber-toothed tiger, so tension's getting more and more and more. And just before he gets to the cliff edge, the saber-toothed tiger's about to attack him, and he dives to the left. The tiger goes over the cliff. He's still got all this tension, and when we're tense, we show our teeth, and they a lot of the same muscles that we use when we are feeling absolutely terrified are the same as when we are elated. Now, all that tension has got to go somewhere, so it is released as laughter and relief. So that's another way of imagining relief theory. So here is a couple of examples of relief theory. So what I want to point out is that I'm giving you these examples and exercises as a way for you to explore them. I'm not necessarily saying do this and then go out on stage. If you do it and then it really works for you, by all means, you go for it. But these are just examples and ways of you being able to explore these theories, and I'm trying to give you examples that exist on kind of the edges of that spectrum, and exercises that exist on the edges of that spectrum, so that if you wanted to, you could stay there or pull it back a little bit. But I think it's better to learn these things on that edge, and then you can go, oh, that was too much, or you can go, oh yeah, that felt like that like really worked for me. Anyway, so these are two of your examples of relief theory. So the first one is dark humour. So very much we are playing with tension. Just the mention of dark humour and taboo subjects can create a tension, which we can then subvert through punchlines and by changing people's expectations. Sometimes known as the gallows humour, and this is an example of how many of us naturally try to relieve tension in stressful situations. I often say in Comedy Lab that everyone who you ever meet has the potential to be funny, and that is so true. And you'll see people who are quote unquote not comics being really, really funny, and I think that's really important for you to remember, that you have, if everyone's got the ability to be funny, you have the ability to be funny, and it's just a case of applying these techniques in order to properly transpose them to the stage. Another one is comic relief. So this is slightly different to dark humour, which is that what we're doing is we are providing levity to darker situations. It's often used as a narrative device. So for those of you who are writing scripts and sketches, this is something that you might want to look at in terms of how you use relief theory in order to bolster your writing. We can see examples of comic relief being seen all the way back to Shakespeare. So we see comedic characters in Macbeth. So we've got the gatekeeper in Macbeth, which was highlighted by Ian Wilkie in his book Performing in Comedy, which I very much recommend for you to have a look at. There's also relief in Hamlet. And we also see like the jester with King Lear. And here's some exercises that you could have a go at in order to have a play around with relief theory. So you can do a little improv, stressful role play, So what you want to do is you and your partner, person you do your writing with, want to role play a stressful situation, so job interview, visit the dentist, funeral, that kind of thing, and then add comedic elements to try and lighten the mood. So you're not actively looking to make the situation comedic, but you are trying to lighten that mood across time through subversion of expectation. Now, in terms of like full on being comedic, another exercise you can do is write in sketches and specifically do it on taboo subjects. So again, funerals. I find that death's quite good. I find that like inappropriate things to say at a wedding, inappropriate things to say in any job role is a really good way of doing this. You could also do an improv game called World's Worst, which often was played on Mock the Week. So you can do like world's worst thing to say, world's worst thing to say at a funeral, world's worst thing to say at a wedding, world's worst doctor, world's worst police officer, that kind of thing. And you'll find that that's quite a good way of building up your comedic writing muscles, but also a lot of the things that come out of these role plays and improvs and sketch writing can be used for sketches and can also be lifted into act outs for your own material. So, there's no reason why you couldn't, say if you have an actual story about a doctor or the time that you went to a doctor's, there's no reason why you couldn't play World's Worst, come up with a whole bunch of lines for the doctor to say, and then any that you particularly like, you can then lift and then put into your routine that you are creating about going to the doctors, that the doctor said to you, quote unquote, said to you. Because in terms of that, I am a big fan of things being authentic. I think I should mention this before we move on. I am a big fan of things being authentic, and so long as the core of the story is authentic, I think that's absolutely fine for you to then start to exaggerate and embellish, so long as there is, kernel of truth in there. Anyway, so we're now looking at the psychological factors of comedy theory. So there are certain elements of our psyche that connect to humour rather than what we were looking at previously, where humour's connecting to our psyche. So the link between psychology and comedy is deeply rooted in the exploration of human behaviour, cognition and emotion. Freud, going as far back as Freud, who was very, very interested in like jokes and laughter, thought that humour often arises from the release of repressed thoughts or feelings. So again, we're linking to relief theory there, providing a cathartic outlet for unconscious desires or tensions. Understanding the psychological mechanisms behind comedy offers invaluable insight into human nature, social dynamics, and the way in which individuals perceive and interpret the world around them. So we can use this as a way of bringing our observations into line with our comedic output, the more that we can understand the psychology of it. So these are the three different types of psychological factors which connect to humour, which is superiority theory, which is basically someone being better than someone else or something being better than something else. Surprise, which is connected to subversion of expectations, and social bonding, which is about connection between you as a comic and an audience. So we got superiority theory. So as I mentioned before, superiority theory of humour suggests that laughter arises from the feeling of superiority over others. Now this is something that is rapidly, it's not rapidly changing, but it is constantly changing. So what we would have classed as superiority theory maybe in the 1950s and what we might consider superiority theory now is slightly different. And that's not to say that the core has changed, but in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and you know, even further back, superiority could be where we have a lot of links for the racist, misogynistic humour that is connected to that time period. It was very, very big in the 50s, 60s and 70s to be used specifically in that way. And as things have changed, we now look back on that just in general, not even just in comedy, and say, oh, that is abhorrent. But superiority theory is still there. Superiority still connects to a part of our subconscious. The way it has changed is that often the superiority theory is seen in us presenting ourselves as underdogs. The situations become the superior, or the comic then becomes superior to a situation. So there might be like an oppressive boss that you get the better of, or there might be, again to use that same analogy, you are doing your job and then someone who's like incredibly snooty comes in. And again, this reframing of superiority theory has happened in more recent times in terms of mainstream comedy, particularly once alternative comedy started up in the 1980s, and the cultural revolution that I'm not saying alternative comedy created it, but it was certainly part of that, which we now see the echoes of, particularly when we look at superiority theory. So here's some examples of superiority theory. So there's ridicule, which is highlighting the actions of others with your own viewpoints. And again, you could even... So I put here as an example bigots. So there's this rule in comedy about not punching down. And that means if someone is kind of a lower social standing to you, it is somewhat inappropriate to mock them. But if someone is of a higher social standing, or in terms of their placement within society, such as bigots, who are very much placed below what we expect of a society, then that's an opportunity for you to ridicule and play around with superiority theory. And the flip side of that coin is self-deprecation, which I highlighted a little bit before, which is highlighting particularly your own ineptitude in situations in relation to normal conventions, in which case you are putting the audience in a position of superiority to you as a comic. So here's two examples of exercises. I don't know why I used that. Picture with the teeth twice there. So observational writing. Observe everyday situations, interactions, and you want to be jotting down the observations that highlight human quirks and idiosyncrasies. This is a really good thing for you to do in like a public setting, or say in your workplace. When you're like looking for elements within a kind of culture that you can go, okay, there is there's elements of social hierarchies going on here that I can start to pick apart. Why do we do that? Why is this accepted? And what your placement is within that. But again, it's always important to make sure that the people who you are ridiculing are of a higher status than you are. People or situations, because particularly in 2024, people are very, very switched on to that kind of thing. So you don't want to put yourself in that situation where you're having the audience turn against you. Another thing is to have a play of a comic trope called roasting, which is where you could have a little thing with your friends and get them to do little light-hearted jokes around your idiosyncrasies. Make sure that you do this within boundaries. Make sure that you say oh, X, Y, and Z is off limits, because I feel like that is something that I don't particularly want joking about. But A, B, and C is something that you can go for gold. So you may find that is quite a nice little exercise in terms of again playing around with the concept of superiority. But again, any of those lines that come out of these exercises, there's no reason why you can't lift them and put them into wider routines that you're working on. Don't forget again about like exaggeration and hyperbole in both of those situations, again linking to authenticity. So the next one is surprise. So surprise is a fundamental element of humour that plays a key role in many jokes. So surprise is essentially the fundamental punchline. We set up a precedent and an expectation that we then subvert, and we surprise. Our brains are wired to seek out patterns and predictability. So when a joke subverts our expectations, it triggers a pleasurable surprise response. And again, this part to do with this kind of tension, that kind of tension is linked to us. Once we burst that tension, we remind the audience that they are safe. They're in a safe environment, and it's safe for them to be enjoying themselves. So to be able to be playing around with these these relief, right? So to be able to play around with these parts of our subconscious, because we're revolved to constantly be looking for danger. 200,000 years ago, when we first started to evolve, there was all sorts of things that we needed to look out for. We are not the biggest, we're not the strongest, we're not the fastest. So there's a part of our subconscious that's constantly looking for danger and going, are we in danger? So to be able to go a little bit of tension, burst that tension, you have that cathartic release that audiences are looking for. Punchlines that come out of nowhere or unexpected twists in storytelling catch us off guard and elicit laughter. So you can play around with this in terms of your storytelling. Rules of three are particularly good at this. So your Englishman, Irishman, Scottishman joke. The Englishman sets up the premise. They go down the magic slide, and you wish for whatever you want at the end. So they ask for £1 million, and they land in £1 million. The Scottishman goes down and asks for 10,000 diamonds. They go down and land in a bucket full of diamonds, and then so we've set up the expectation, we've reinforced the expectation, and then the Irishman goes down and says "we" and lands in a bucket of "we." So at that point, we've got that element of the surprise. This element of surprise, it keeps the comedy fresh and engaging, and audiences never quite know what to expect next, and that's something that will help you keep attention across your set. Ooh, what's going on there? One sec. Okie doke. So, this was part of the problem that I had. I don't worry. I'll just carry on. I'll carry on from this slide. So that's part of the reason why we were a little bit late today, because we were having some issues with Google Slides. But so some examples of exercises you could do in terms of surprise. You could write jokes, like already well-known jokes, Christmas cracker jokes, and then write new punchlines and try and see if people can guess what the punchline was or what the punchline's going to be. Another thing that you can do is be playing around with specificity. So if you are particularly playing around with so if I say, I really like Greg's, no, I've never heard of Weight Watchers. I don't see why you'd bring that up, right? It's okay, but if I go, I really like Greg's steak bakes, particularly like them at 10:57 because they've just come out of the oven, and they're around about 87.5 degrees, which is like really really hot. And what I do is I wait until I sit down on the bench, and I'll leave it out for 4.5 minutes, and then I sniff it and I go, ooh, that snake and gravy goodness. Oh, and mustn't forget the onions. And then by this point it's cooled down to a whopping 74.5 degrees, at which point it's around about the same as if I had gotten it later, but I don't really like the person from Greg saying to me, it's just warm. It's like, I don't mind it being just warm, but I want that to be my choice. I want it to be my choice. I don't want it to be your choice. No, I've never heard of Weight Watchers. Why would you ask? Right. That there has got like a lot more going for it in terms of those surprises, the subversions, even though we're still going on that same journey. So that's two things that you can do. Change around punchlines, and you can also play with specificity. Now the final thing is social bonding. So comedy is inherently a social thing, which is we particularly like humour as a way of connecting, and we particularly like to use humour as a way of showing our social standing and our good grace. Now this is one of the ways that a lot of people struggle a little bit when it comes to them transferring what happens off stage to on stage, because most people's experience of being funny is through being funny with their friends. Now when you go on stage, you don't necessarily have that same history. They don't know your foibles, you don't know the audience's foibles, they don't know what you're treating as a joke, they don't know what you're treating as serious, they don't know what you're treating as sarcasm, they don't know what you're treating as not sarcasm. So that's one of the things that is particularly hard to connect across, but ultimately with humour, that's something that we are looking to recreate in our ability to do stand up on stage. We want that social bonding, but over a wider scale. So two types of humour that connect to social bonding. One of them is crowd work or MCing. So this is where people go into the audience and they will ask them, you know, what's your name, what's your job, that kind of thing, and create humour out of the back and forth. So someone who's really good at that is someone called Paul Smith, who you may have seen the videos of, but there's lots and lots of crowd work videos out there for you to check out. Another type of social bonding is callbacks. So what you want to do is, this is where someone will make a joke earlier on in their set, and then recreate that punchline. It could be the punchline word for word, it could be the whole joke word for word, but they will have some kind of reference to it later on in their set, and that's an example of you basically saying to the audience, so I've appreciated your intelligence and your humour to be able to throw this to you. It's almost a bit of like a there you go to the audience. And things that you can do in terms of exercises is have a play around with doing like a home comedy club for your do you know what? Let me just double check. Because I'm sure. Oh, that's so bizarre. But yeah, it's a good job I can remember all this. Oh, there they are. There they are. So yeah, so inside jokes. That's another example. Inside jokes. I thought it was weird. They've just gone further down in the PowerPoint. But yeah, inside jokes is also another element. This is not something that I would particularly advise for people to do, but these are some examples of these are some examples of exercise that you can try, which incorporate everything, which is you can try the comedy club at home, host a comedy night with your friends and family members, where everyone takes turns performing stories, sharing their favourite jokes, encouraging supportive laughter and constructive feedback to create a positive atmosphere and inclusive atmosphere, and make sure that you add in some of those audience interactions, but again, do it within boundaries. And another thing that you can do in terms of the social bonding is to watch a comedy special. So get yourself on something like Next Up or Netflix, or Amazon Prime. There's loads of people that you can go check out, such as Kiri Pritchard-McLean, Phil Ellis. There's also you could also check out. Those are like two of my mates that I've thought of off the top of my head. Who've got specials that you can check out, and I very much recommend them. But there's loads of Fern Brady. There's another one. People who've got specials that I recommend for you to check out, and just after you've watched them, have a chat with your friends and see what moments made you laugh the most, and what bits you particularly bonded over. I'm just going to check if there's anything that I have missed out. What were that? Little bits of. So, I'm sorry, I'm doing this out of order. Just threw me a little bit. Again, clicking back to surprise. Punchline twists is examples of surprise, of that subversion, and sitcoms particularly use surprise. So a big example of a surprise is when Ross said Rachel's name in Friends. Here's two exercises that you can try out. So I mentioned the joke remix before, but also take turns in telling a story and deliberately introduce unexpected plot twists or endings to catch the listener off guard. And you can experiment with different types of twists. In terms of the social bonding, something that is worth noting is that sitcoms and comedy clubs provide social spaces where people can come together, and they're particularly set up in a way to try and be as inclusive. They try to be as open as they can do in order to maximise that social bonding. I think we're at the end. I'm glad that I found those final slides, even though it did mean that I did them a little bit out of order, but I hope that I was still interesting. So something that I want for you to take away from this is that psychology of comedy is a multifaceted field. It encompasses a variety of theories and psychological factors. And the more that you understand, the more you can apply them to your own craft and your own routines. Now, if you've got any questions, do not be afraid to ask me. Just send me an email. If you are interested in doing some of our in-person workshops, we've got 2 spaces left for our improv course, which is next month, and we're over 50% sold on our stand-up course, which is on in July. So get on those because they'll hopefully go really, really quickly. Right, have a lovely rest of your evening. Catch you in a bit.